Okay, I'm going to talk about Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh and Sean McDowell. And I'm going to focus on the chapter that deals with the documentary hypothesis, the view of modern biblical scholarship that Moses did not write the Pentateuch. Now, um, the reason I'm doing so is because in the evangelical community, here's a copy, one of the latest copy of the book by Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh and Sean McDowell. Okay, that's the copy of the book. I'll also be talking about an earlier edition of the book where Josh McDowell wrote the book. Sean McDowell is his son. He's an apologist. He teaches apologetics at Biola University and also at Talbot Seminary. And he has a podcast. So he's very influential in the evangelical community. Josh McDowell, I think he wrote his first edition of Evidence That Demands a Verdict way back around 1978. Around that time, I think 1978. And so it's a book that's been praised by people in the evangelical community. I mean, in this book here, the introduction, there's Eric Metaxas. Eric Metaxas praises it. Justin Brierley praises it. William Lay Craig praises it. And many other people in the evangelical community. And also this view, basically what Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell, they believe that the Bible is inerrant, right? They're committed to that view. Now, if you're committed to that view, you're going to have to be against the documentary hypothesis, because the documentary hypothesis says that Moses did not write the Pentateuch, and that has been the traditional teaching of the Christian church for 2,000 years. So, for example, at Dallas Theological Seminary, they don't teach the documentary hypothesis. John MacArthur doesn't teach the documentary hypothesis. No, evangelical scholars, at least most of them who are not fundamentalists, do not teach the documentary hypothesis. Sean McDowell and Josh McDowell came out with the book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and one of the chapters in the book is against the documentary hypothesis. Now, I have no problem with honest scholarship where you honestly confront the evidence and deal with the evidence. I'm going to download some videos that will deal with specific details, but for right now, I just want to make a point. Imagine that, I'll give you an analogy. Imagine that you're on a trial. Imagine that you are on trial for some crime that can send you to prison for many years. You would want the jury to be unbiased and give you a fair trial. You definitely do not want a jury that, before they hear the evidence, already knows that you are guilty. It would not be a fair trial. Now, they might say to you, well, no, we'll listen to the evidence. We'll listen to your lawyer, the attorney that will defend you. We'll listen to all the evidence. But we already know you're guilty. Okay, so what's going to happen? They're going to listen to the evidence. And since when you're dealing with evidence, there's always, evidence is not 100% certain either way. You can always interpret evidence and you can say, oh, it means this, it means that. That's why juries disagree. But if you're being tried, you definitely do not want the jury to have already made up its mind before they look at the evidence. Now, they may tell you, well, give me the evidence. and we'll listen to it and we'll evaluate it. But you know what's going to happen? They already know you're guilty. The verdict's going to come out, you're guilty. Now, here's my point. This is exactly what happens when you're dealing with people like Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell, and any fundamentalist Christian or evangelical Christian who's committed to the view that the Bible is inerrant, and then they write a book showing that the documentary hypothesis is false. That's what Sean McDowell does. Josh McDowell, they have a whole chapter. Josh McDowell in his earlier edition had 3 or 4 chapters on it. Okay, so I'll talk about that too. They go through all the evidence. They present many scholarly views. Liberal scholars, conservative scholars. But you know what? They come to the conclusion that there's no reason to believe the documentary hypothesis because the reasons are no good. They're not convincing. But you know what? They already knew that before they even looked at the evidence. Because they've already told you at the beginning of the book that they believe the Bible's inerrant. And they believe that what the Bible says. Now, I have no problem if that's what you believe, that's what you believe. But you can't have it both ways. You know, if I'm on trial and you're totally convinced that I'm guilty, that's fine. But I don't want you on the jury. You're welcome to your opinion, but don't play the game of being an honest jury person, a juryman or whatever they call them, a member of the jury. Don't play that game if you already have made up your mind and you've already determined that the person is guilty. Because whatever evidence you hear, you will interpret in such a way that it is not convincing. That's exactly what happens with Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell. They present the evidence, selective evidence, they cherry pick the evidence. They're not scholars, they're not biblical scholars. There's our biblical scholars who spend their whole life with that know Hebrew, that speak Hebrew, that Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell are not biblical scholars, and yet they write a book giving evidence that the documentary hypothesis has no grounding behind it, that it's not true, and that the evidence is overwhelming that Moses wrote the Pentateuch. And they claim to be, it says, evidence that demands a verdict. Well, they quoted some evidence and they cited some evidence, but they've already made up their mind before they even looked at the evidence. They're like the jury that has already made up their mind that you're guilty. Yeah, I'll look at the evidence, but I already know you're guilty. Well, you know what the verdict's going to be. The exact same thing happens with Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell, but not only with them. So I'm just using them as an example. It happens with all biblical scholars or fundamentalist evangelical scholars who are committed to the view that Moses wrote the Pentateuch before they look at the evidence. If you're going to play the game of honest scholarship and honest debate, you have to be willing to approach the evidence without already having made up your mind before you look at the evidence that the evidence is no good. And that's exactly what Sean McDowell and Josh McDowell do when it comes to the Bible. I'm just focusing on the chapter that deals with the Pentateuch, with the view that Moses wrote the Pentateuch or he didn't. The documentary hypothesis says that the Pentateuch was written over hundreds of years after Moses was dead. Moses did not write the Pentateuch. That's what biblical scholars have come to the conclusion over the last couple hundred years. Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell are not biblical scholars, and yet they speak with an authority that is very dangerous, and it's primarily dangerous for people who are really young evangelical Christians who really want the truth. And they're not going to get it from Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell or any other fundamentalist biblical quotes scholars, because they've already made up their mind before they look at the evidence. So what I'm going to do is go over the evidence in detail and show that that's exactly what's happening. Okay? I really think that the type of books that evidence that demands a verdict, those type of books, and that is one of the most popular books in the evangelical community, and really it's really doing a disservice for young evangelical Christians who are seeking the truth. And when they read these type of books, it's going to make it very difficult for them to give up false beliefs. And eventually, when the thousands of them who eventually see that the dishonesty of the book, many of them will leave Christianity. Totally, they'll just leave it because they realize that this type of scholarship is totally dishonest. And it's, if you're going to be a Christian, which I am, you don't need to be a Christian believing things that are obviously false. So basically, I will do different videos and go through the evidence and just show you step by step that I'm not making this stuff up. I would, I find it really a shame that the type of scholarship that evidence that demands a verdict represents is terrible. So the verdict my own verdict on the evidence that demands a verdict is the book itself is guilty. It's a massive confusion. It's dishonest. So that's what I'll be talking about. And if you're interested in this question, I think it'll be helpful. If you have zero interest in it, then obviously don't listen. But if you are interested in it, I will point out some things that might be interesting. And I do have a background in this area. I have a PhD in English from Berkeley. I have a PhD in philosophical theology. I've been reading biblical criticism my whole life. I've been a Christian since I've been 16 years old. And for about 10 years, I believed exactly what Sean and Josh McDowell believed about the Pentateuch. And the reason I believed it is because I believed that type of scholarship until I found it was totally dishonest. And eventually I stopped believing it. But I haven't ceased to be a Christian, because Christianity doesn't depend upon a false scholarship. So if you're interested in this, just continue with the videos, and I think you'll enjoy it.